There's a lot of rumors floating around the internet and in the news media.
This is big. We are sitting down with one of the criminal defense attorneys of Sean Diddy Combs as the convicted rap mogul awaits sentencing in federal court and a decision on whether he'll actually be released from jail before sentencing. Oh, and by the way, there's also talk that he may get a pardon from the president. Yeah, all this going on. I get the chance to actually discuss what has been happening behind the scenes.
The air in the courtroom was so thick with tension that it was hard to even breathe. Every single person seated inside knew this wasn't just another trial, wasn't just another celebrity scandal. This was the climax of months of speculation, years of rumors, and decades of a carefully crafted image finally colliding with a reality that could no longer be denied.
Covered every aspect of Sean Diddy Combs' criminal case. We are about to speak with one of his defense attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro. She is part of his legal team at trial. And the trial, by the way, that ended with Combs acquitted of the most serious charges, racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking. He was convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. They call these the Mann Act violations, moving women and men across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex work. Now, we have talked about Alexandra Shapiro before. She was the attorney, for example, who argued for admitting that video of rape accuser Mia wishing Combs a happy birthday after the alleged assault. She played a key role in this case. And with questions about could Combs' convictions be thrown out? What could he be sentenced to? Will he make bail before he's sentenced? Can he get a presidential pardon? This feels like a great opportunity to get some insight into all this and certain aspects of the trial, like why didn't they call Christina Quorum? All right, so let me get right into it. I am joined right now by Alexandra Shapiro herself. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here on Sidebar. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I want to get into. We will talk about all the latest developments. But first of all, I got to ask, what was it like to be part of a team like this one? Because you know, every argument, every question, it is going to be focused, debated, on a national, maybe an international stage. This is a major case. And also, by the way, you were representing somebody and are representing somebody who for the past 2 years has taken quite a hit in the media and wasn't the most popular figure in the last 2 years. So to be representing Sean Combs in this massive trial, what was it like for you?
I mean, it was actually an amazing experience. First of all, the team was fantastic. I mean, I've never worked with so many great lawyers with different talents meshing together. And it was great after I've been working on this case since last September, dealing with the client being just bashed in the media, bashed by a ton of frivolous civil lawsuits that just sort of whipped up the hysteria against him. It was great to finally be able to help him have his day in court. And so the actual witnesses could be heard, and we had a chance to really expose a lot of the truth of what was really behind all of this.
Obviously, this is a win, right? He was acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing. Did there ever become a time, though, during the course of the trial, maybe in the first several weeks, when you're like, I'm a little nervous, I think he may get convicted of racketeering or sex trafficking, or you were confident throughout the prosecution's case that they just weren't reaching their burden?
Well, we felt good about the trial most of the time and we're confident, but you never can be too confident in a federal criminal trial. I mean, especially in the Southern District of New York, the government almost always wins, and it's a huge challenge and really, really difficult to win. So we were always concerned. There were points where it seemed to be going well.
The man at the center of it all, Sean Diddy Combs, sat in his chair motionless, his eyes locked forward as if staring into an abyss that was opening wider with every passing second. The judge's voice rang out, measured, deliberate, unforgiving, and each word felt like another blow hammering down onto the legacy Diddy had fought so hard to build. The sentence was long, far longer than he could have ever prepared himself for, and in that instant, the mogul who had once walked red carpets and boardrooms with the confidence of a king suddenly looked like a man stripped bare of everything. His silence said it all. Diddy, known for his energy, his bravado, his control over every situation, didn't say a single word. He didn't interrupt, he didn't beg, he didn't argue, he simply sat frozen, a hollow stillness replacing the swagger he had once worn like a crown. People watching described it as eerie. This wasn't the fiery response of someone ready to fight back. It was the silence of disbelief, of someone whose reality had been shattered beyond recognition. His lips pressed into a thin line, his shoulders stiffened, his hands.
The defense's argument, hey, all the people who testified against Sean Combs were not being truthful, or were taking their accounts, were listening to their accounts, and what they're saying just didn't amount to a federal crime? Is it a mixture of both? Just trying to understand what the argument was.
I mean, I think it was a mixture. It depended on the witness, and a lot of the witnesses were telling the truth, but the truth didn't hurt Sean. It helped him. There were some people who were shading the truth. The great thing about it was there was a ton of evidence in written communications that people had created at the time, all these text messages. There were videos, and that really helped us expose the truth, because these were things that had been recorded this is what people were, the girlfriends, others were saying to Sean at the time of the events in question. And so, there was really no way for the witnesses or the government to hide what was in the written documents.
Now, I will tell you, if you had been following what we've been doing here on Sidebar, Law and Crime, we call balls and strikes. So there were, during the course of the trial, we would say, this was the strength of the prosecution, this was the strength of the defense. There was such effective cross-examination of these key witnesses that we all kind of wondered, was the defense going to call any witnesses? And you really did. And what was that decision? Because I understand there were witnesses who were planning to be called. There was an idea to put forward a defense case. There was a choice not to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that strategy was about?
Sure. I mean, you always have to be ready to put on a case. At the end of the day, what it comes down to at the end of the government's case is how well do you feel it went in for us? And it's always risky to put on a defense case. People don't realize that, but there's always two sides to everything. And if you put on a witness, and even if it's, 70% good, if the prosecution scores some points, it can really undermine you. And so if you feel like the government's case has gone in really well for you, it can be actually riskier to call any witnesses. People don't necessarily realize that. But at the end of the day, we just made a decision that we thought the case had come in well, and we didn't want to, sort of change the dynamic in a way that could be risky for us.
Was Christina Coram ever potentially going to be called by the defense? We were all shocked why the government never chose to call her, since, I don't know, her name came up almost every single day through almost every witness. Was there a plan by the defense to call her?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific plans or non-plans, but it was more of an overall decision just not to put anyone on and just to use a few pieces of evidence that hadn't come in.
What do you think about the prosecution's choice not to call her? Because I will tell you, we did lunchtime shows, live shows with our audience. I would say 80% of the questions that we got during 7 weeks of testimony was, why is she not being called and will she be called? Were you surprised the prosecution chose not to call who was supposed to be the main alleged co-conspirator?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that she would have been a double-edged sword for them, and they probably didn't want to take the risk. As you saw during the trial, even a number of the witnesses that they had always planned to call that they did put in kind of blew up in their faces or had positive things to say about Sean that maybe they weren't anticipating. And so it would have been pretty risky for them to put Christina Coram on the stand, I think.
There was so much being said about your client in that trial, obviously in the media, facing a number of different lawsuits. We also wondered whether or not he, and it's his decision alone, whether he wanted to take the stand and give his...
Clutched the edge of the table as though holding on for balance, but his eyes, they were blank, as if he couldn't even comprehend the numbers being read out. The judge continued, recounting the severity of the crimes, the gravity of the evidence, and the reasoning behind the harsh punishment, every sentence built on the weight of the last, until the total years behind bars felt like an avalanche crashing down. Some in the room gasped quietly, others stared in disbelief, a few nodded solemnly, as if justice had finally been served, but all eyes kept returning to Diddy, to the man who had seemed untouchable for so long, now reduced to a silent figure staring into nothing. This was not the ending he had imagined. For decades, Diddy had carefully sculpted his image into that of an untouchable mogul, a man of influence, power, and charisma. From chart-topping hits to business ventures, he positioned himself as someone above the chaos, someone who could never be knocked down. Even when whispers of scandals arose, he brushed them off, always appearing a step ahead, always in control. but the courtroom was not a
We convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reactions they had to Comey's closing, and even the reaction just in general to the 5 or the 6 U.S. attorney team. I think their reactions in general were very noticeable, and I think that this is a jury that wants to talk to people once I think he gets sentenced.
Okay, so now let's move on to the pardon discussion. So if he can't get relief from the court in getting the conviction thrown out or a new trial, can he get relief through a pardon? Before we talk about, is this a real thing, what is the process to even obtain a federal pardon? How do you even go about that?
Sure. So it's a pardon or a commutation. If someone is actually in custody, they could also get a commutation, which does not wipe the crime off your record. It just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for a commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you could also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment, you would reasons why you feel your crime was you were unfairly prejudiced or unfairly convicted. All of those things go into the packet. I always try to help people that are filling it out on their own to show them, what to point out. Those type of cases are always heartening, because those people deserve pardons. They deserve commutations if they're in, and it's some sort of crazy drug offense that was brought up in the 90s. All of those things are reasons for pardons and commutations.
So is this real? I mean, here's the thing. He is in a much better position to get a pardon or a commutation of his sentence because he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. There is a way to justify this based on some of the arguments I just mentioned that his defense team is making, that maybe he shouldn't have been brought up on this. The Mann Act, not as serious as what he's facing. Is this real? Do you think that this is going to happen, that he's going to get a pardon or a commutation from President Trump?
So I don't know if he's going to get one. I do think that it's real because, like I said before, President Trump, whether they like him, don't like him, if he feels something is wrong, and we've seen this happen before in the past, if he feels something is wrong, someone got railroaded, someone was convicted, wrongfully, he will take a look at that. Yeah, Sean Combs has said things in the past that probably were not great. I've read them, but I think that if anyone understands that, I mean, look at President Trump's cabinet. There's individuals on his cabinet. His vice president has said things in the past that weren't great for him. But he understands that people evolve, people change their minds. People understand that there's certain requirements, things that are going on, certain pressures that they're under. And I don't think that would affect whether or not he would grant a pardon or commutation based on things that were said in the past. I think it would be based on what he gets sentenced to, or based on the facts of the Mann Act, that the Mann Act itself, I think, is unconstitutional. I think there's issues.
Boardroom, and the judge was not someone who could be swayed by charm, connections, or celebrity. Here, the power was stripped away, and what remained was the man behind the persona, vulnerable, exposed, and powerless. Outside the courthouse, the news spread like wildfire. Reporters scrambled to capture reactions. Social media lit up with trending hashtags, and the world watched as the story exploded. Some fans were heartbroken, devastated that the man they admired had fallen so far. Others expressed satisfaction, claiming the verdict was long overdue and justice had finally caught up with him. The industry itself was rattled. Other artists, producers, and insiders knew this case wasn't just about one man, but about the culture of power and secrecy that had shielded him for years. If someone as powerful as Diddy could be taken down, no one was safe. But inside, none of that mattered in the moment. The silence lingered. The judge's words echoed in the room, their weight impossible to ignore. His sentence was long, punishing, and absolute. And Diddy, for all his success, for all his bravado, For all the years he ruled the industry, had no escape. He didn't lash out, but his body betrayed.
And located a brownstone in New York that was sufficient enough, which we thought, which was one entrance in, one entrance out, for our security to be there, and no rooftop, couldn't get out from any of the windows. So we could always go back and see if that's still available. I don't know if it is or not. So I can't determine what a judge is going to think. I don't think he would let that happen if he decided to make bail, but you never know. This judge was very fair to both sides in the trial. And as far as would he want to screw up what he, after being, the convictions not coming through, I think he got to be dumb to do something like that.
Right.
He is going to possibly get his life back. I don't know what's going to happen in the music world. I don't know what's going to happen in his regular life, but he's not facing the time that he was facing before that.
And I'm going to talk about sentencing a little bit later on. The private security, right, that would monitor
Yes.
him 24/7. The argument could be, and this is something the prosecution's put forward, how can we trust that he's not just they're not bought and paid for, they're not really going to watch him if he's hiring them, there's a conflict of interest there. What's your response to that?
My team is ex-law enforcement, all gentlemen that have been involved either in the Marshal Service, FBI, police, even some CIA. So again, my people would not risk their lives on something, or risk their reputation, or even possibly a criminal charge on something like this. So my guys are vetted. They've been doing this a very long time. So they wouldn't jeopardize anything like that. Now, when we first talked about private security, Puffy wanted some of his people. We denied that right away. It's our guys. It's my reputation on the line here. And that's when I went to court, and Tony Rico and Mark Agnifilo both stood up and said, hey, Mr. Judelson is, his reputation's on the line here. He's been doing this a long time. I've bailed out Harvey Weinstein, Conor McGregor, Plaxico Burress, Cat Williams, Lawrence Taylor. So, I'm not going to put my reputation or my license in jeopardy, for X amount of money. To me, I'm going on. I might want to turn this business over to my son one day.
Yeah, the New York Times did a profile on you called Bailing Out the Stars. How are celebrities different? How are they different from other criminal defendants?
More demanding. When you get the phone call from the lawyer or whoever, a publicist, anybody, it could happen in the middle of the night. A celebrity does not want to spend an extra minute incarcerated. And things change so drastically with, when I did Conor McGregor, he surrendered, he wanted out right away. Plaxico Burress, when that happened, we were talking, and Mayor Bloomberg was involved allegedly in the situation, and Plaxico's bail went from X to X to X. And then I'm on the phone with his agent saying, hey, I need you to send me a copy of his deed for his place in New Jersey. And then with Dominic Strauss-Kahn, obviously, the world basically came to a standstill because he was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money, get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen. The lawyer could get the bail, but at the end of the day, it's Ira Jettleson that's running in, putting everything together, and the pressure. And I work in chaos all day long. That's my life. So, when it comes to chaos, that's my specialty.
You handle it well, though. You handle it quite well, given the...
Him. Those close by saw the slight trembling in his fingers, the tightening of his jaw, the deep breath that caught in his chest. He was fighting to hold on to whatever fragment of composure he had left, but the silence revealed what words could not. He was broken. As the gavel finally came down, the sound echoed like the final note of a song no one wanted to end. The courtroom stirred, lawyers shuffled papers, reporters scribbled notes, family members whispered to one another, but Diddy remained still, as if rooted to the chair. The weight of the verdict pinned him in place, and even as the guards moved closer, preparing to escort him out, he didn't move until they urged him to stand. Slowly, almost mechanically, he rose to his feet. His eyes stayed down, never meeting the judges, never looking at the jury, never glancing at the spectators who had come to witness his downfall. The silence followed him as he was led away. No outburst, no statement to the press, No dramatic gesture, only the quiet walk of a man realizing that everything he had built, everything he had fought for, was crumbling faster than he could grasp. His empire, his music, his businesses, his reputation, all of it now overshadowed by the prison sentence that would define his future. For years, people had speculated about whether the rumors surrounding Diddy would ever catch up to him. For years, the industry seemed to protect him, turning a blind eye, staying silent out of fear or loyalty. But this moment proved that the silence couldn't last forever. Justice had finally spoken, and its voice was louder than his money, louder than his fame, louder than the legacy he tried to control. The public reaction only grew more intense as the hours passed. Clips of him sitting in silence went viral. Commentators dissected his body language, analyzing his blank stare, his tightened jaw, his stillness. Was it shock? Was it denial? Was it acceptance? Theories flew across social platforms, each one painting a different picture of what was going through his mind. But one thing was certain, the silence spoke volumes. This was not the reaction of a man in control. This was the reaction of someone who had just lost everything. But inside the courtroom, none of that mattered. The weight of the sentence hung in the air, pressing down on Diddy's shoulders. Those close enough could see his hands trembling slightly on the table, his jaw clenched tight as he tried to keep from breaking. Yet the silence spoke louder than any outburst could. It was the silence of a man who realized he had finally lost. The judge did not waver, did not soften the blow. The words were cold, heavy, and direct. The length of the sentence was unforgiving. The punishment was severe, and it sent a message, not only to Diddy but to the entire industry watching. No amount of money, no amount of fame, no amount of connections could shield him now. The walls of power he had spent decades building had collapsed in a matter of minutes. When the gavel finally came down, the sound echoed like a death knell for the life Diddy once knew. The courtroom exhaled, the silence breaking into murmurs. But Diddy himself didn't move. He just sat there, staring, processing, perhaps replaying every decision, every moment that had led to this. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the mogul, the boss, the king of the room. He was just another man facing the consequences of his actions. And in the days to come, that silence would follow him. From the moment he entered the prison system, his name would no longer carry the same power. The man who once commanded respect with a single look was now just another inmate facing years behind bars. His legacy, once a source of pride, now hung heavy with shame. His silence in that courtroom would forever be remembered as the moment the world saw the real Sean Combs, not the mogul, not the superstar, not the boss, but the man stripped of everything, staring into the harsh reality of justice. What unfolded in that courtroom was more than just a sentencing. It was the collapse of an image, the destruction of a myth, the end of an era. The silence wasn't just Diddy's, it was the silence of the industry, the silence of a culture that had long ignored the cracks in the foundation. And now, with the judge's words cementing his fate, that silence became deafening. Diddy sat, he stared, he listened, and in the end, he walked away quietly, carrying with him the weight of a prison sentence that would haunt him for the rest of his days. No music, no applause, no cheering fans, only the cold echo of the judge's voice and the silence of a man who realized, too late, that everything he had built was gone.